Hello and welcome to GameSack. We're talking about the Sega CD, a much requested episode. Here we finally are.
Yeah, another Sega console episode. Of course. Don't we like do one of these every other month or something like that?
No.
Well, all right, Joe. Well, you got some convincing to do, so, give it to us.
All right, well, here's a little bit about the Sega CD itself. The Sega CD. Welcome to the next level. Known as the Mega CD throughout most of the world, the Sega CD was released midway through the life of the Mega Drive/Genesis. It was the second CD system released for a console after the TurboGrafx 16 CD-ROM. It was introduced in the US in late 1992 at a price of $300. It attached to the Genesis via the expansion slot on the side, and it required its very own power supply. The original Sega CD had a motorized tray, but the Model 2 had a flip-top lid to lower the price. This model is generally more reliable as well. There were even some all-in-one systems that had a Genesis and CD built into a single unit, like the Wonder Mega or XI from JVC. Sega also had their own compact all-in-one unit called the CDX, also known as the Multi-Mega. The Sega CD had its very own 68000 processor running at 12.5 MHz, an ASIC to perform complex scaling, and an 8-channel PCM sound chip. Most of the games came in extremely fragile, oversized plastic long boxes in the US in order to stand out on store shelves. The games themselves are of course on CDs, which can feature over 4,500 mega power. Overall, there were 210 games released for the Sega CD, and it sold over 2.7 million units worldwide.
All right, Joe. Well, that's pretty cool what you said, and I'm slowly coming around to this whole Sega CD thing. But of course, it's going to be in the games. What are the games all about? Are we going to do all those FMV games? I mean,
actually, we've already done an episode with all the FMV games, so let's focus on the non-FMV stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff.
Yeah, so let's just get right on into it. Do you like Blade Runner? You wish it were full of humor? Then Snatcher by Konami is the game for you. This here is one of the most sought after games on the system, and it's becoming more expensive all the time. It's a cyberpunk digital comic, and it really does live up to the hype, and it's the only version of the game that's ever been released in English. But then again, I really love digital comic style games, so maybe I'm biased. Anyway, you play as Gillian Seed, who is a brand new junker who conveniently has amnesia. A junker's job is to take down a Snatcher, and the Snatcher is an android who wears human skin, kinda like the Terminator or maybe even a replicant from Blade Runner. Anyway, Snatchers are running amok in the city of Neo-Kobe, and people are fearing for their lives. You see, Snatchers kill their victims and take their place in society. You progress through the game by selecting various text commands. You'll often have to ask the same question multiple times before the answer changes and the story can advance. Now, this style of gameplay may not be for everybody, but personally I love it.
I'd say that this Harry has put himself in a pretty dangerous spot.
There are also sections where you get to fight in sectors. These are little robot spider thingies sent to try and stop you. You can use the D-pad on your controller, or you can use Konami's Justify light gun. I find the controller to be a lot easier, but to be honest, the gun is slightly more fun. These scenes show up here and there as a simple means to give you some action sequences, as limited as they may be. Overall, this game has tons of atmosphere. There's great little details all over the place in the graphics if you look hard enough. One really cool part is inside the Outer Heaven Club, you'll see people dressed up as a bunch of different Konami characters. Even all of the various Japanese versions of this game aren't as cool as this one is inside of Outer Heaven. There's lots of voices, and almost all of them are very well done.
Are you telling me Queens has underground treatment facilities?
There's also some really cool music that sets up the mood and provides plenty of tension. It even has your typical Hideo Kojima trademarks, such as cutscenes lasting half an hour. I greatly enjoy the story, and it's easy to see that this game was inspired almost entirely by movies. You've got Gillian Seed and the Snatchers themselves, both from Blade Runner, with the Snatchers resembling the Terminator. The post-apocalyptic setting and visuals are very similar to Akira, and Random Hajil here is clearly Sting from the runaway smash hit movie Dune. I've played through this game many times since I bought it back when it was released. I even bought the Justifier to go with it on the same day. It's such a great game, and Konami did an excellent job here.
Gillian, I read motion. Use extreme caution. The signal is coming from outside the window.
It's Alice!
The dog is dead. Body temperature suggests it was killed about 10 minutes ago. No doubt the work of Snatchers.
Here's the amazing Spider-Man versus the Kingpin. This is a really cool action platformer that's a completely different game from the cartridge version, but parts of it are kinda strange and really didn't tingle my spidey senses. I mean, I really like how this game is set up. You have an overhead map of New York and you can pick any level you want to play through. The strange thing for me is that when I play through most of these levels, I have no feelings of accomplishment. You see, when you pick a level, you can basically go from the beginning to the end and not kill a single person, and it'll be counted as complete. You usually fight through a sub-level or two before your spidey senses alert you to the boss. These fights are fairly enjoyable. It's an interesting idea that you aren't locked into a screen during a fight. For example, if you're fighting Dr. Octopus and he's kicking your ass, you can simply leave and find a health power-up, and then go back and resume your battle. I kinda like that. Spiderman controls really well. Obviously, he can cling to walls and ceilings. He can use his webs to detain enemies or animals until you kill them. And of course, he can swing on his web. This is a fun thing to do, and it really feels good once you get going. There's a lot of variety in the areas you traverse, so the levels never get boring to look at. Some of them are almost maze-like, and I find myself wandering all over the place trying to find the exit. Being a CD game, you can expect animated cutscenes with lots of voice acting. It's all really lighthearted and enjoyable, but I'm not really liking the art style here. Is it just me, or does Spidey's eye look sunken in? There's also a decent soundtrack to this game by Spencer Nilsson. It's got a few really good songs, and a couple that I'm just wondering how they made it in with the rest of them. I don't like hearing some dude singing butt rock while I'm playing a game. It just isn't right. All in all, this is definitely a great game for the system, and if you own a Sega CD, then you really need to own this one.
AH-3 Thunderstrike is a cool helicopter game by Core. It's called Thunderhawk everywhere else outside of the US, I don't know why we're so special. This is an objective-based game where you fly on missions to destroy certain things or to escort friendlies across a danger zone. It takes place in the 3D world and you can fly anywhere at any time. Well, that is as long as you stay inside the large rectangular battle zone area. Leaving in this area ends your mission. There's lots of things to blow up, but the primary targets are all you really need to worry about. Once those are blown up, your mission is usually complete. Your copter has pre-supplied weapons like missiles and rockets, but your main gun has unlimited ammo. The control in this game is really good. Turning is smooth and quick, and it's easy to avoid enemy attacks. In fact, the entire game is kind of easy. But that's okay, as there are around 50 different missions to complete, so it's gonna take you a while. It's really satisfying blowing stuff up, and I spent a lot of time with it when I bought it back when it was new. It puts the Sega CD's scaling and rotation abilities to really good use. Unfortunately, the colors do leave a lot to be desired, but it doesn't detract from the fun. The music's pretty damn good, but sadly there's not a whole lot of it, so you're going to be hearing a lot of the same tunes again and again if you play through all 50 missions. Despite having a rather simple premise to the gameplay, I really do recommend that you give this one a shot.
Incoming bandit. Incoming bandit. Incoming missile.
Final Fight CD is a great release for the system. At the time, this was the closest you could get to having the arcade version in your house. The Super Nintendo version only had 2 playable characters. This version did it right and had all 3 fighters available to choose from. Also, unlike the Super NES version, this lets you play 2 players at once. Did Sega pay Capcom to gimp the Super Nintendo version or something? Anyways, the gameplay's great for the most part. There are some instances when I feel a slight lag when trying to do simple things like a jump kick. It kind of sucks, but you do get used to it and compensate for it as the game goes on. It's not an easy game either. It can be done, but it'll take some practice and you'll definitely be using those continues. The graphics look great. The character and enemy sprites are huge. They also all animate really well. Hey, at least they left Poison and Roxy in the game this time, although they are slightly censored and have more clothing on than they do in the Japanese version. Can't show too much leg, I guess. Another feature that I always liked about this game is the bonus stage. I like the thought of somebody totaling a car with his bare hands. Also included is the time attack mode. Pick your character and see how long you can last. Waves of enemies come at you and they just get stronger and stronger the longer you last. It's a really fun side game and I like that you fight in different backgrounds so it doesn't get boring. Probably the best upgrade to this port is the music. It's been given an all new arranged soundtrack and most of it is really enjoyable. They even voiced the intro to this game. When I'd watch the opening sequence in other versions, the voices I gave them in my head sounded nothing like the voices I'm hearing here. Stupid Sega! Can't even make the voices sound like I originally imagined them.
Jessica? My sweetheart since childhood.
Anyways, this is a great addition to the system's library, and it's a library that's really lacking in quality beat-em-ups.
Dark Wizard is a strategy RPG released by Sega in 1994. The ultimate goal in the game is to defeat the evil Dark Wizard Villainese. At the beginning, you choose one of 4 different characters. What's cool about that is that each character has their own perspective of the story to play through. The game plays as your typical hexagonal strategy RPG. You move your troops around and you fight battles when you're next to the enemies, if you want. You can watch these battles play out as animated scenes or turn them off and view them as text. Now, having text battles is nowhere near as satisfying, but it greatly speeds things up, so you're probably going to go the text route shortly into the game. You can also enter cities in order to talk to people, buy stuff, and progress the story. Your ultimate goal in most of the battles is to capture the enemy's castle and recruit new members, which you have to pay for. The graphics are fair. I like the battles, but I felt that they could have used some backgrounds instead of just a plain black screen. The super long cutscenes for the story are really nice. The music is excellent, and there's a lot of different themes, and they're all very well composed. In fact, it might even be the highlight of this game. You can't really go wrong with Dark Wizard as it's a long, in-depth, and fun strategy game. Though there is another strategy RPG on the Sega CD which I think is definitely better. I wonder which game that could be.
Shining Force CD is a special treat for Sega fans, and even for people like me. This is not an entirely new game. It's actually a remake of the 2 Game Gear games Shining Force Gaiden 1 and 2. It also has 2 new scenarios that are exclusive to this release. The first 2 can be played right from the beginning. Once you complete these, you'll unlock the 3rd scenario. The 4th scenario is unlocked after finding a hidden item and beating Scenario 3. What's interesting is that you'll need a CD backup cartridge if you plan on playing the whole game, as the internal memory isn't big enough to save all the files necessary to unlock the last scenario. Stupid Sega. As you can see, this is a strategy RPG game. In my opinion, the Shining Force series has no rival when it comes to this genre. Sure, Nintendo has the Fire Emblem series, but they ruined it because once a character dies, they're dead for the whole game. I really don't like that. Not in Shining Force. Once a character dies, you can just spend some money and revive them later. Anyway, the remake of these Game Gear games looks and sounds great on the Sega CD. The reason I like this series so much is that they're not trying to be too deep in terms of gameplay. As I've said before, I really don't like spending more time messing around in menus than actually playing the game. And this one has none of that. It has just the right amount of gameplay versus time wasted in menus. Everything is straightforward and easy, which in turn makes for a really relaxed game. The way everything is set up is also really easy. As you finish one battle, you'll have a short scene with text, and then you typically visit a town, though it's not like the towns that are in the cartridge Shining Force games. Instead, it's just a single screen, but you can still buy weapons and accessories. You can also heal yourself and revive the fallen, and of course, the most important thing you can do is save your progress. After that, then you get put into the next battle scenario. The battles are really fun, and for as slow as they might seem, they're really engaging. There's a lot of strategy involved in traversing a map. Treasure chests can be anywhere, and you'll want to seek them out because they usually have some awesome stuff inside. This is a great game to play in small spurts, as each battle can be anywhere from 20 to 50 minutes. It really is one of the best games I've played on the Sega CD.
Solstar is another cool Sega CD game by Core. In this one, you fly a spaceship as you try to save the Solstar system from the invading Mercoids or some other such nonsense. The entire game takes place in a third-person perspective. You start out with Space Harrier-style gameplay flying forward and blasting enemies. Eventually, you'll get to the surface of a moon where you're taking out enemy defenses. Then you're back flying towards the ship that you need to enter while taking down even more enemies. Once you get inside that ship, your craft morphs into a different type of vehicle. This one can move in 3 dimensions, and you can go anywhere you want in this level. But what you need to do is take out the core and then select a warp gate. Then it's more of the same again and again, but that's okay. There's even a cool mech sequence where you're wandering around underground shooting stuff up. Overall, the game is fairly nice, but it's a tad too hard for its own good, I think. It's really easy to get hit. The life bar does not work like a normal life bar. It goes down, then back up. The manual doesn't explain it clearly, but I think that if you take another hit while it's down, then you lose power. So to my knowledge, you can take an unlimited amount of hits just as long as none of them are right after the other. And that is almost impossible to do. The controls are perfectly fine except in the 3D roaming sections. Turning your craft in these stages requires that you press diagonally up in the direction you want to turn. And you turn slow. If you want to move your ship up or down in these stages, you need to do it while holding the C button. Now this is fine and all, but with the relentless amount of enemies attacking you, it can become kinda cumbersome. The graphics are amazing. Core almost always did well on a Sega CD. In fact, this game might push the system's limits more than any other game. Everything scales and lots of stuff rotates, and it does it all really, really well. The synthesized orchestral music is pretty good, and it helps make the game feel epic. If you enjoy playing good games while being slightly frustrated but like to ooh and awe over the graphics, then check this one out.
Here's the Terminator, which is an entirely different game than the cartridge version. I loved to watch this movie a lot back in the day. In this installment of the game, you play as Kyle Reese, the guy who was sent from the future to protect Sarah Connor. It follows the movie fairly closely by showing cutscenes with short clips from the movie. Anyways, the main draw is the gameplay itself. This is all fine, and it's actually pretty fun. Kyle controls very well for the most part. The only problem I ever had was going down ladders, but I didn't let it bother me and finally found the exact spot you need to be in. You start out in the future where Kyle is dressed in his uniform. The action is solid, the backgrounds look great, and killing Terminators feels really good. Eventually, you'll be sent back in time, and just like the movie, you'll be wearing a trench coat and armed with a shotgun. All the levels are pretty darn big, and you'll be doing a bit of platforming, going up and down and all around, which is really fun. If you want to, you can explore a bit and find some hidden power-ups like life, grenades, and even one-ups. If you don't want to explore, that's fine, because there's lots of power-ups for you in plain sight. But it's really worth it to explore because you'll be shot at a lot, and finding life refills will help you survive. I like that they went to the effort of completely remaking the game for the Sega CD instead of just taking the cart version and adding FMV and music to it. And of course, I can't do a review without mentioning the music. The soundtrack was composed by Tommy Tallarico. He's known for doing some great work, and he doesn't fail here. It's a truly great soundtrack worthy of a playlist in iTunes, even though it's completely different from the movie. Joe let me borrow this game for the review, and I really had a great time playing it. I don't think I want to give it back to him. Actually, I'm pretty damn sure I won't. Find yourself an easy copy, like I just did.
And there you go, 8 games so far, but we've got a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, the 8 games that we covered actually were really cool. I liked a lot of those.
Yeah, you like Snatcher.
Especially Snatcher, yes. Snatcher is an awesome game.
Yeah, and like I said, we've got a lot more to go, so we're going to shorten the length of our reviews by a little bit to get them all in there, and well, let's just get right back into it. Of course, we gotta mention the working designs RPGs like Lunar. You play as Alex on his quest to become a Dragon Master. Of course, other incidents present themselves and they need solving by you. The battle takes place with kind of a 3/4 side view, very similar to Final Fantasy. It works really well, I like this style of battling. The game is very responsive and fast, unlike most RPGs. It's definitely one to pick up if you can find it at a reasonable price. Lunar Eternal Blue was a sequel that takes place 1,000 years later. This time we're controlling Hero and he's off to unlock the secrets of the Blue Spire, at least at first. This game offered much improved cinematics and a lot more of them as well. The speed which you wander around the overworld has been decreased, but honestly it probably won't bother you. You still wander around really fast indoors. There's also a pay-to-save mechanic in here, but honestly I've never even really noticed it as I played. In my opinion, this game is a lot better than the first. And hardly anyone ever talks about Vey, or Vi as the game calls itself. You are Prince Sandor and you're getting hitched, but then some mechs attack, steal your bride, and kill your parents. Now it's up to you to set things right. Vey seems very primitive compared to the Lunar games. It's not a bad game, but the random battle encounters happen way too often. The battles take place from a third-person view. They're pretty simple, but they get the job done. Also, the way the game dishes out experience points is inconsistent at best. For example, sometimes more powerful versions of enemies will give you less experience. The graphics, music, and sound are all a bit below average. Still, it's a pretty good game if you can put up with getting interrupted countless times and the other oddities.
Devastator is a really fun mech game by Wolf Team. We probably should have covered this in our mech episode. It plays mainly as a platformer with a few shooter-style levels thrown in to keep things interesting. Your mech controls really well and can upgrade and change its weapons by collecting power-ups throughout each stage. Of course, you can't get to the next stage without defeating a boss. These battles usually aren't very tough, but they're still entertaining. Every level is well designed, looks good, and is really fun to play. To top it off, this game has a really good soundtrack. Sadly, this title only saw a release in Japan for the Mega CD. It would have been a great original game for the US market.
There's even a version of Cliffhanger on the system! Yeah! Actually, it's a fairly stiff beat-em-up that's not tremendously exciting in any way. But what I want to show you is the Sega CD exclusive snowboarding scenes. This certainly isn't the bunny slope. It has some awesome scaling and rotation, but you won't get a chance to admire it at all. You'll be far too busy dodging tons upon tons of obstacles. Your timing has to be exact, and there's never a moment of rest. It's very easy to run into something, and if that's not enough, you have an avalanche chasing you. Even rocks will jump off the hills just to attack you. This game sucks.
Ecco the Dolphin was also ported to the Sega CD. You play as Ecco, and your dolphin pod and lots of other sea life was sucked up by a vortex. You search the oceans, finding a way to rescue your pod and return peace to the sea. You swim the ocean using sonar to speak with other dolphins and whales. You can speed burst to eat fish and replenish lost health. Ecco also breathes air, so you gotta surface from time to time to replenish your air gauge. This isn't just a port of the Genesis version. This one has some redesigned levels, and best of all, it has a new musical score by Spencer Nilsson. It's a really great soundtrack that sounds new age and ambient. There's also some educational FMV that'll tell you all about dolphins. The sequel, Ecco Tides of Time, also got a release on this system. As with the previous game, little enhancements were made all throughout. One cool feature I found are history glyphs that show CG cutscenes that tell the story from the first game. They don't look very good today, but back in 1994 this was something special. It's a fun game with another great soundtrack by Spencer Nilsson. There's also some cool teleportation stages where you swim through rings to go to distant waters. These were fun levels trying to swim through the rings. Some of them are on top of the water, which makes them really tough to jump through. Back in 1995 or so, I bought both of these games on closeout at Toys R Us for $8 each. The thing is, I didn't even own a Sega CD at the time and had no intention of buying one either. I bought these games specifically for the soundtrack and never regretted it. I still listen to both of these from time to time as they're perfect for when you just want to chill out.
Here's the Sega CD version of Three Ninjas Kickback. The main part of this game is an average platformer that appeared on the Genesis and Super Nintendo as well. However, the Sega CD got 2 exclusive 3D levels using its special hardware scaling. These stages are pretty cool. I honestly don't know what they're doing in a game like this, but they're a breath of fresh air after playing the platforming segments, that's for sure. It's just too bad that most people will shut the game off before ever even making it to these stages.
Battle Core is a first-person mech game by Core. Pick one of 3 mechs with varying attributes to battle robots that have been infected by a virus and then take back your planet. This is a slow-moving game and the action never gets too frantic but keeps at a nice steady pace. I really like how this game plays and the levels are all set up very well. It will take a small amount of time to get used to how you control your mech, but once you do, you'll have a blast. My only wish is that there would have been a jump button and a strafe feature. Those would have been very helpful in a few areas of this game. Anyways, there's lots of great weapons here that can do some nice damage. All this and a nice jazzy soundtrack make for a great game. Check it out.
SIL Feed is a vertical shooter from Game Arts. Well, I guess technically it's a 3/4 shooter due to the angled view, but it plays like a vertical shooter. You fly over cool looking polygons and other effects while blasting tiny enemies and bosses. I like how the voice proclaims that there's this huge craft approaching, but this tiny little thing is what we get. Kind of reminds me of how Dave talks to girls. Between stages, you can choose which weapons you want attached to your ship. The graphics are cool, but unfortunately the game is mostly in space, so that adds a lot of empty nothingness to the visuals. The music is alright, it's not bad. It's a somewhat decent game for your Sega CD.
Android Assault is a shooter by Human Entertainment. I know this title screen says Bar Yarn, but trust me, the box says Android Assault, and that's what it is. I've got to admit that I really like this game. It plays well enough like any shooter out there where you have a handful of different weapon types. You can power up your ship to the point that it'll transform into a mech, which is really cool. The part that I like the most is being able to charge up your weapon. As long as you aren't shooting, you can charge up a bar at the top of the screen. You then release it at any time for a much more powerful attack. If at all possible, it's best to let the bar charge up 3 times. This is the most powerful attack and will even crush bosses quickly. Of course, it's different depending on the weapon you have, but I like this one the most. Your powered up attack releases a snake thing that'll go all over the screen and home in on enemies. It's totally awesome! This is a really fun game with great graphics and a better than average soundtrack. Get this one if you can.
Power up.
The Ninja Warriors is a port of a mediocre arcade game by Taito. This version of the game never made it stateside. You're a robot ninja and your mission is to assassinate the president. And I am not kidding, that is really what's going on here. The soldiers are just doing their duty trying to stop you and you hack them up. Even patriotic dogs try to defend their country and you just slice them to death. The graphics are pretty bland, but the music is fairly good. I could never figure out how to beat these stupid tanks. This is by far the best port of the arcade on any platform, but really who cares?
Dungeon Explorer is an overhead dungeon crawler, and I'll bet you can guess where this game got its inspiration from. Yeah, I thought it looked and played a lot like Gauntlet 2. Luckily, I really like playing this game because you have to have a lot of patience in the beginning. It's going to take a long time to level your character to where you can fight and don't have to do so much running away. Leveling up your character only gives them an HP boost. To up your attack power and defense, you need to buy armor and weapons. I'm not used to this, as normally when you level up, everything gets a boost. Still, it's enjoyable minus these few flaws and adds a bit of diversity to the system's library. And despite the name being the same, it's actually not the same game as the Dungeon Explorer on the TurboGrafx 16.
There's a few notable racing games on the Sega CD, the first of which is BC Racers by Core. This one has Chuck Rock and the gang racing around in a kart-style racer. This game has appeared on several platforms, but I feel that this is the best one since you can attack left and right instead of just to the right like in the other versions. Overall, the presentation is pretty good, if a bit underwhelming. I'd say that this one is a good one for casual kart racing fans. Jaguar XJ220, also by Core, is pretty cool. Or for you Brits, Jaguar. Anyway, you race said sports car around a variety of different tracks in this early game. The control is pretty good and the difficulty is just right. The music is pretty laid back and it helps keep your nerves calm. You can even build and save your own tracks. I wonder if this game was sold at Jaguar dealerships or if you got a free copy of this game if you bought one of their cars. Better damn well hope so, those cars are not cheap. Anyway, it doesn't look like much, but it's fairly enjoyable. Formula 1 Beyond the Limit is an F1 racing game by Sega of Japan. This one's a lot more technical than arcadey. I'm generally not a fan of F1 and definitely not the games that go into full-on simulation mode. The control here takes a lot of getting used to and the graphics, they could be a lot better. I mean, things have a hard time even staying on the screen. You do get to race against real drivers of the time, however. I recommend playing pretty much anything else unless you're a hardcore F1 fan. And while not exactly a racing game, The Adventures of Batman and Robin consists of only driving and flying sequences. You try to catch up with the typical bad guys and avoid their weird traps. There's also a timer, which doesn't make things any easier. This one also has an exclusive episode of the cartoon between the stages.
If you want to see Mr. J, you gotta follow me.
This game is extremely hard to win at, so don't say we didn't warn you.
Popful Mail is a platformer by Falcom. It says action RPG on the cover, but I'm finding it hard to feel the RPG elements in this game. Well, other than the earning money to buy stronger weapons and stuff aspect, and maybe the adding members to your party aspect. Okay, I guess it's an action RPG, sort of. Luckily for us in the US, it was brought over by Working Designs, and you know that they just can't leave this game alone. They have to add their special touches to the game, which they did.
Just the facts, man.
The platforming is really fun, and the action isn't too bad either. There's only a few enemies on screen at any given moment, so you can pretty much take your time. There's a lot of story here, and the action will pause for you to listen to some decent voices so you can keep track of what's going on. These can get old fast, but fortunately you can just turn them off and speed through the text at your own pace. The best feature of this game is that you can save anywhere you want. When you die, you can continue fairly close to where you saved. With really nice graphics, gameplay, and a good soundtrack, this is a great title for the Sega CD.
Let's play ball!
Eye of the Beholder is a game in the Dungeons & Dragons series. In this one, you create your party and start exploring underneath the city. And then a beholder traps you in. Oh no! It's a dungeon crawler 100% for sure in the tradition of Might and Magic and other games of that nature. You roam around the dungeon, find items, open doors, and fight enemies. You even need to figure out how to disarm traps. When you're worn down, you can rest your party. But it can actually take over a week or maybe even more to recover fully. Look at that! The graphics are pretty choppy and they could have been animated much smoother. The music is great though, as it was done by Yuzo Koshiro. Obviously this has been ported from a computer platform and the use of a mouse is highly advised. Playing with a mouse the game is pretty fun, but it can still get old pretty fast.
Here's the ever-popular Sonic CD. To me, this game seems a bit harder than the other 16-bit games in the series. It's not so difficult that it'll make you want to rage quit or anything, but you might notice a bump in the difficulty. As is usual with Sonic games, the action is fast and the levels are all big with multiple paths. The ability to time travel is a cool aspect and adds some meat to the gameplay. The graphics are all really nice, and I like the backgrounds to the 3D-style bonus stages. And you're treated to a great CD soundtrack by Spencer Nilsson. This game has some of the best music I've heard in a Sonic game. The Euro and Japanese versions have a different soundtrack which is also really good. Sonic CD is definitely a strong title for the system's library.
There are a couple of more cyberpunk digital comic games like Rise of the Dragon here. In this one you play as Blade Hunter, who starts out investigating the death of the mayor's daughter. There's a very heavy interaction with items in this one. You have to remember things like taking your ID card with you wherever you go. Basically you move items over your little guy to make sure he has them on his person. Also be sure to save often, as it's really easy to abruptly come to the end of your mission. There's a few flaws here and there, like being able to get permanently stuck, but otherwise it's a great game.
You'd better have a darn good excuse for standing me up, Blade. I'll forgive you this time, Blade.
There's also the Space Adventure Cobra from Hudson Soft, which will cost you nearly $200 more than Rise of the Dragon. In this one you play as the perpetually cigar-smoking Cobra. He's got a big price on his head and he starts out looking for a colleague. Of course, he quickly runs into trouble. Everything in this game is menu-driven by text. It can get old fast, but it's still a worthwhile game even though it's definitely not for everyone. There's also some rather mature content in here, well, at least it was considered mature back when this game came out. It's a good game, but not quite worth the asking price.
Forget everything you've seen here.
No problem, pal. I got a bad memory anyway.
Lucky for you. Go home, have your mother tuck you into bed.
KO Flying Squadron is a shooter developed and published by Victor Entertainment. It's a very fun shooter that's in the cute-em-up side of the genre. I think Joe doesn't like the term cute-em-up, but whatever, it fits. I'm almost certain that I like these better than regular shooters. I just love the wacky art styles and hugely bright colors that this game and games like it have. I mean, just look at the cute factor, it's amazing! Your character controls really well. If you don't shoot for a couple seconds, you can get two options that'll make the game much easier, and you can even use them as kamikaze weapons. A nice soundtrack helps round out this extraordinarily expensive yet solid title for the Sega CD's library.
Robo Aleste is a fairly nice vertical shooter by Compile. It's supposedly the spiritual sequel to Musha, and you can see it in a lot of ways. However, the weapons aren't as interesting, and neither is the setting the game is placed in, which is feudal Japan for some reason. The graphics are kind of drab and not as inspired as Musha's backgrounds and enemies. The music is pretty cool though, with some nice techno tracks. It can get really hard really fast if you die, so be careful. Worth it if you can get it for a good price. Another game by Compile is Panic, and this one is messed up. Basically, there's a computer virus, and that means that every single button in the entire world, every single one, is messed up. You need to press buttons and work your way to the central computer to destroy the virus and restore order. In the meantime, however, get ready for some absolutely insane crap. What happens as a result usually makes no sense whatsoever, absolutely none. I got this game when it came out, and there are still lots of buttons I haven't pressed yet. Now this game can be freaking hilarious, but really only in short bursts.
Batman Returns is a horrible action game, but it's a great driving game. The action sequences are straight from the Genesis release with new music and are average at best. New to the CD version are the driving sequences. These are all entertaining and have some great atmosphere. The only problem is that they're not easy. No sir, not at all. You'll be playing these sequences over and over again trying to figure out the pattern of each of the bosses. And the levels get much harder as you get further into the game. It's all good though, because as I said earlier, it's really fun to play. Luckily for you, you can turn off the action sequences and make this into just a driving game, which is what the game should have been in the first place. The game also has a better than average soundtrack with a few exceptional tunes by, you guessed it, Spencer Nilsson. If you need a version of Batman Returns on a Sega console, get this one.
You can't talk about the Sega CD and not mention Road Avenger. This is the only FMV game that we'll mention in this episode, but it's the best one ever made on any system. It's full of action and it's hilarious. It's also very, very Road Warrior-ish. I like to pretend that some awesome new game just came out and I'm racing to the store to pick it up. And like always, traffic stands into my way, so I've got to get creative with my shortcuts. Even traffic helicopters try to stop me from getting my game. Sorry about your accident, man. Can't stick around, I got places to be. This is the only FMV game that you absolutely need. And there you go, that's the Sega CD for you. Of course, not every single game. Some of them I think I'll wait till a Left in Japan episode to cover, because kind of interesting. But overall, what do you think of the Sega CD?
Well, actually, I'm convinced. I think it's actually a very good system.
Really?
I do.
Wow.
I mean, when I first went around and played it, I wasn't too hip on it, but now that I've played a lot of the better games for this system, it's awesome. It really is.
What do you guys think of the Sega CD? Let us know, and in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
I don't even need to ask you, because, you know.
I turned on my TV, stared right into the screen, plugged in Sega CD, best games I'd ever seen. Welcome to the next level, not any level, this is the next one. Welcome to it, welcome to the next level. You know you wanna do it, listen to me, the Sega CD. Welcome to the next level.
All right, Dave, you ready to do this Sega CD episode?
Are you feeling all right, Joe?
I'm fine.
You don't look good. You look like you're running about 12 frames per second there.
I'm fine, Dave. See?
Your voice is off too. Your voice quality is about 16 kilohertz or so.
It's fine. Can we just do this? This is a big episode, all right?
No. I've seen this before. You've got FMV-Bola, don't you?
I do. It's the disease you get when you play too much Sega CD. It just happens, Dave. And you know what else?
What?
It's contagious.
Oh my God!
Now you've got it too.
I've got FMV Bola.
Yes, you do.
No.
And you know what the cure is? To play Super Nintendo CD-ROM, and it doesn't exist.
Oh my God! What's Nintendo gonna think? I gotta get out of here. Find a cure.
There is no cure.
Bastard.